So after a lot of trial and error, I have just decided to record. This is me trying to use Google Meets. I've tried to use Zoom. The easiest way for me is just going to be record, and we're just going to do it this way. I don't think that there's a way where I can show my face throughout this whole thing, but here I am down here in the little corner. So this is my presentation over visualizing and inferring, which actually are two of the biggest tools that help me in the learning process, especially in science. So starting out by what's important to know about this strategy. Visualizing is important for students to do during the learning process for whatever content they're engaging in. So when students visualize, they become active learners. So when students are asked to communicate about their visualization, if they draw it on paper, if they talk to their neighbors about it, the pictures they paint, or the ways they describe their visualization to their neighbors, is a way for them to use previous knowledge and help paint that picture. So visualizing also helps them notice key details in language in the text that allows them to personalize what they read. I think this is one of the most important things about visualization, is that it personalizes what they're reading and makes them form a connection with it. So this helps keeps readers engaged, and it motivates them to finish the text because of that personal connection established. It can also aid in recalling and summarizing the text to show how much they understand. So even if students visualize and infer different scenarios, they should be able to make it relate to the text and make sense. So this is really important when we're having them talk about that learning process. If you notice that students are coming up with scenarios that don't really relate to the text, that is a way for us educators to know that they probably didn't have enough background knowledge and they need to spend a little more time. So what's important about inferring? The two go hand in hand. They help each other out. So when students infer, it allows them to practice the ability to merge background knowledge with the text clues to come up with ideas that are not explicitly stated in the text. When students infer, they also get taught how to draw conclusions and make predictions based on what they read, which is really important to be able to draw a conclusion from what is being learned. This also helps students gain the ability to not just infer information about the content they're learning, but also use it in real life to learn how to infer body language, tone, social cues, surroundings, and patterns. So this is a really great visual that Dr. Mass provided for the information. I just kept referring back to this visual of the inferring umbrella, and I just think it's a great way to see the different ways readers can use inferential thinking to improve understanding. That's my cat in the background, don't mind that. So what are some different ways to use this strategy with students for my classmates and peers? So the beautiful thing about these two strategies is that there's really a plethora of ways these strategies can be used with students. And it's also great because even the most simple strategies can be used from kindergarten all the way up to higher education. So just to list a few, a lot of these are found underneath that inferring umbrella I just showed, but just to list a few, predicting outcomes, upcoming events, and actions is a great way to utilize some tools of inferring and visualizing. You can use context clues to infer the meaning of unfamiliar words, which is a big one that I'll touch on in the scientific field in a bit. One of my favorite ones is just to close your eyes and listen to a segment read by the teacher and illustrate what was seen. I think this is a cool way to show students that they visualize very different things, but it still is related to the content. I'm not going to go through and read all of these, but there are a plethora of ways to use strategies in all grade levels and all content areas. So how can you apply them to teaching in their content area? Both visualization and inferring should be used as a tool across all content areas because it creates a deeper understanding that is personalized to each student. I think this is a huge takeaway from this presentation, is that these tools help. I'm so sorry about my cat. I'm so sorry. Raja, come here. Anyway, visualization is also a way to activate one's senses in order to interact, better understand, and connect to what they're learning and reading. One of my favorite activities I did in grade school was using the five senses and learning and reading and writing. And I think it just takes students' literacy to the next level because they can relate to it through their senses, which is personalized to them. Lastly, when students are taught to infer, they can draw conclusions or make predictions based on new and known information to improve understanding. I think this is kind of the cap of what all learners should be doing at the end of a lesson. What am I taking away? What were the conclusions? How did this relate to the previous unit? How does this relate to my personal life? How does this relate to future knowledge I would like to know? I think that's a big one when it comes to this. So the next slides are going to be how I would use this strategy with the text I pick, more specifically scientific text, more specifically to do with the immune system. So the immune system is a very, very, very complex body system, obviously. So using visualization and inferring techniques can be really helpful. So I just came up with a couple scenarios and ways that I would use those tools. So the first one is always in my classroom, I want to make sure that I'm teaching students to be the best versions of themselves, to have tools they can use in the real world that really set them up for success. So I would make sure to spend time making sure they are inferential thinkers, so they can read body language, they can read social cues, facial expressions, they know how to communicate with their peers, they have that initial connection to one another and me, so that it sets them up for success in the classroom and outside of the classroom. So an actual activity for the immune system is exploring unfamiliar vocabulary words in the classroom. So we would do this through inferring, because the quickest and most effective way for teachers to become familiar with for readers to become familiar with vocab is through inferring by using context to figure out the meaning of unfamiliar words or concepts. So, for example, scientific words are very lengthy, but they have a lot of prefixes, suffixes, and root words. So if I can set them up for success by showing them and getting them familiar with these root words, it will make their inferring with these definitions a lot easier and set them up for success. So an actual lesson in the classroom, I would enhance their previous knowledge. Oh, I just talked about that. Yes. So next, I would help students visualize to better understand dimension, time, and space of objects that can be done through comparison of a known object to an unknown object. So for example, I and students could have a hard time visualizing the size of, for example, one's heart just by the diameters mentioned. So giving them something to compare it to where they know the size of, like their fist, for example, is a great way to make it make sense to students. So for a lesson to help them visualize the process of innate immune system by having them become a bacteria after they have already compared the size of a bacteria to a human white blood cell. Bacteria cell is way smaller. So they would be this small, tiny bacteria trying to enter the body, and I would have them draw comic strips of specific aspects of this process and have them share with the class to hear their personal accounts of how the bacteria infiltrated the innate immune system. And the cool thing about this lesson is that there's multiple ways this bacteria can infiltrate the innate immune system, so it'll show them different points of views. And then another great visual tool for science is just graphs and figures in general. Looking at cold hard data is kind of hard for anybody to process, so putting it in these visual graphs is very helpful for students to look at data and their findings. Lastly, this is my concept map, which I actually will just go ahead and show you here if it loads. Okay, well, it's not gonna load, but I actually really enjoyed using this, and I kind of down here, this is where I came up with how I would relate it to my content area specifically, but using this app was actually really fun, and I think I'm gonna use this more often. And yeah, that is my presentation. Thank you so much.